You can outwork smarter people.
When a founder or sales leader is in panic mode about revenue, what are the most common bad decisions you see them make?
Yeah, they put too much pressure on the prospect. Because I'm going to jump back in and try to save the deal, close the deal. And sometimes that just adds, again, more confusion and chaos. A full pipeline solves a lot of problems.
Explain to me, like I'm 12, what is a sales process and why does not having one kill revenue?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a roadmap, right? It's the starting point and the finish line and all of the places that you stop along the way to see all the, the largest ball of yarn and the best coffee in town. Like, it's all of those little milestones. It's all of the things that need to happen in order for you to get to the finish line. I cannot motivate the unmotivated. Well, because AI is going to do whatever you tell it to do. And if you have a broken process or a half-baked process, it'll just do it faster. And I'm like, does AI suck? Or did you give it a half-baked process?
And guys, welcome back. Wow, we got a little bit of reflection there. We are back for the RevIntel podcast today. I got Kristie Jones, and we have a very, very fun-packed episode. Our guest today, look, she has a superpower that most founders desperately need, but they don't realize they're missing. It's the ability to turn revenue chaos into predictable systems. And if I'm right, you've spent years helping companies escape panic-driven decision cycles by building formal sales processes that actually work. You've built SDR teams from zero, help founders transition. Jesus, I need you. From doing all of the selling themselves to leading real sales teams. And you've got a philosophy that's deceptively simple. I think if I'm right, it's do the right things and the right things will happen. So let's find out what these right things actually are. Kristie, give us a quick intro. Who are you? What do you do? And why should anybody stay here for the next hour to hear what you have to say?
Perfect. Thanks, Shane. I am Kristie Jones. I've been a SaaS sales leader, like you said, for years. Thanks for not pointing out the exact number. Where I have built out and scaled sales teams. I currently work with earlier stage B2B SaaS founders, like you said, trying to formalize, document, and processize everything going on so we can have some consistency, because consistency leads to scaling. So that's sort of the primary get me started thing that I do with founders. But then secondarily, I actually come in and I call it project managing the hiring process. So my team and I come in to help ensure that they don't mishire. Again, in early stage startups, if you mishire your first or second sales rep, it could set you back 6 to 12 months. So we ride shotgun with our founders. We lead those interviews. We're there every step of the way to make sure that professional interviewees, such as sales professionals, I say buyer beware. Do not pull the wool over my founders' eyes. So we spend a lot of time making sure that happens, and is along with helping them onboard. We want to make sure they have a positive first 2 or 3 weeks experience with the organization.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about from panic to process. Okay. And something that I've heard, it's the kitchen table MBA. So you got a kitchen table MBA. I think we spoke about this a little bit on our first episode that we had together, but growing up in an entrepreneurial family, what did you really learn though at sitting at that table that most business school grads never figure out?
Yeah, I think a few things. Don't judge a book by its cover. You can outwork smarter people. I think my dad would say he wasn't the smartest guy in the classroom, but he was one of the hardest working people. And so he just outworked some people. My mom left college with an English degree and a Spanish minor. And math was not her thing, but she was able to get her real estate license. And I think really it was more about communication and interpersonal skills. It was the, EQ. How you treat people is how people will treat you. Don't judge a book by its cover. My dad would always say, just because someone lives in a really big house doesn't, could mean that that's the most important thing to them. Maybe they don't take vacations. Maybe they don't drive the nicest car. But just because somebody has a nice car, they could live in an apartment. But the fact of the matter is people choose to spend their money all different ways. And so just because they don't choose to spend their money the way you spend your money, doesn't mean that they don't have the money. It just means they've chosen to spend it a different way. So I think those are the things. Just I think there was so much information by osmosis. My brother and I both left that kitchen table with financial literacy and financial acumen in ways that I think a lot of kids didn't, because my parents debriefed every night at the kitchen table. Even though they worked in the same office, my mom is the agent, my dad is the owner broker. They didn't really see each other a lot during the day, and so everybody would come together, and you had to, once around the room, what happened at school today, but then we'd end with the business stuff. And, my brother and I would have already shared our what happened at school today part, and then you were just sort of eavesdropping. But we were kind of office rats, as I called it. We would pop in after school just to say hi or whatnot. And so, we knew everybody's name. We knew who was doing well. We knew who the top agents were. And so, I think modeling, I would say, we got a really good education in modeling. They modeled the behavior of what a successful sales professional and sales leader looks like.
It is really important. And look, for me, like my dad was the type of person. So we grew up in England, we moved to the US. We moved at a time where money was flowing heavily, and obviously markets were going wild. And we arrived in the US with like a ton of money in our accounts. And even then, the only thing we heard was like we wanted to buy stuff, but my dad is just that typical person. No, we're not. Don't buy it. It's a waste of money. He doesn't need it. Um, and it's only like 20 years later. Well, actually 30 years later, because I arrived in the US when I was 13, 1999. So let's say, all right, 26 years later.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just getting a good understanding of like high level business, like economics, right? And understanding that at a fundamental level. And it's because I never like they don't teach you any of that in school.
No.
And it makes it really, really difficult. And one thing I learned very quickly was like I learned how to generate cash. As an employee, I learned how to generate cash. And then when I realized that I could do it for myself, I was able to generate even more cash. But keeping my cash and not spending it and holding on to it, making it grow, that was something that I really, really, it took a lot of work. And I really, like, I'm sure a lot of people wish they had that. But I want to talk about one thing, which is the waitressing signal. And I've heard this a few times. Your favorite job was waitressing because every tip is like a review. And it's like instant feedback on performance. So why don't most sales teams have the same clarity about whether they're doing a great job or not?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the sales leader. And I think the sales rep, right? Absolutely, every deal should give you an indication of how well you're doing. But we really should be doing a better job as sales leaders of giving more, I would say, in the moment feedback as opposed to the annual review or the biannual review.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I think one of the things that I'm concerned about as the world is shifting from, into AI, what I call from the art of sales into really heavily leaning into the science of sales, is,
Yeah.
we're moving away from the type of coaching that we used to do. We're moving away from ride-alongs and sitting in on calls and demos and doing call reviews. I mean, I'm so old, Shane, that I would literally have to, like, I'd have my own headset and I would plug in, right? I would sit right next to my rep in order to coach a call. I'd have to sit next to them, right? And plug in, which means that right after that call, we were still sitting next to each other, right? And so they were going to get in the moment feedback. So,
Mm-hmm.
as technology advances, there's pluses and minuses to everything. And I know that most sales reps didn't love me sitting next to them. But again, I didn't say anything, right? I'm on mute and I'm just eavesdropping in. But I'm able to, if I needed to scribble a note to hand, to slide it across the desk in order to help them, answer a question that they might not have known. Or, like I said, the instant feedback. So I am concerned about, I think that, and again, like, I think I learned that right at the kitchen table, that daily debrief. And, not
Mm-hmm.
only were we my parents debriefing the day, but advice was being given. My dad was the broker, the real estate broker. And so that's the person that the real estate agent would go to when they had questions or they needed some help closing a deal or they needed some legal information to be shared or how do I handle this? And
Mm-hmm.
so, I do think that was modeled, but I think we need, with everybody working remote and, the only way I listen to a call, because we don't even do that live anymore, is if, if my technology or you send me a call and say, "Hey, can you help with this?" Or I, pick out some calls and eavesdrop on them. But I do think that regular feedback is missing today. And think about, I mean, it was so much easier to coach people in the moment, and they came along so much more quickly, right? They got better exponentially because I called it management by walking around, right? I would just
Hmm.
walk through the bullpen, right? And I would just, if I heard something interesting, I'd just kinda hang out. I might hide behind the cubicle wall, if I wasn't plugging in. But, and then, like, just and even the celebrations, right? Like, you hear a great call and everybody walks over and high fives you. And we're missing so much of that these days that, I worry about that next generation.
I'll tell you what, I do feel the same. I can remember it as like it was yesterday. There was this guy, Duperon Riberon, I think his name was Ribeiro or something like this, and he was the CEO from a predictive analytics company in Brazil, and they were blowing up and doing so well. And this was in my like second year of my career at a very established publishing house. And I remember having this guy on the call for about 22, 23 minutes, and it got to that point of like, you know how you build all that momentum and you're pitching and sharing how other clients are doing it, and you're getting to that point of like, okay, cool. For two webinars, typically it's 10,500. On this occasion, look, it's the end of the year. I want to wrap this up. We've been talking for 2 years. Let's call it at 15. Are you all right with like, and it was that back and forth, and it was so intense, and you could see the whole floor. Like we had a number of tables lined up and then on other sections, and the whole, like all the divisions on that floor were just like in awe. And you being the rep, like having that conversation and getting that buzz and feeling that, and like, oh my god, look at all these people looking, like it gives you a little bit more of that, I got to do it, I got to do it. And it didn't go through, the deal didn't happen.
Okay.
He said, you know what,
I
nah,
was so
I
I
couldn't
was
do it.
looking for that happy ending. No.
I know,
No.
all right. No, but it didn't happen, right? Typical sales. And it was so close, but it was so worth it that you didn't like, you don't have that right now. I've closed the biggest deals of my life at home, but have had nobody to share it with. And
I
it's
know.
because we are so isolated from everything around us that used to be so fruitful. So, um, this could like help us transition into the next piece quite well, which is the panic problem. And you talk a lot
Yeah.
about panic being like causes bad decisions. And I think it's, for me, it's usually around cash flow or pipeline. Those are typically your biggest
Yep.
problems. But when a
Yep.
founder or sales leader is in panic mode about revenue, um, what are the most common bad decisions you see them make?
Yeah, they put too much pressure on the prospect, right? When you have an anemic pipeline and you can't, and you have to have I'm
Anemic.
working with a customer now who needs $1 million in sales to close by the end of the year. The board has spoken, as I say.
Hmm.
And and I just did pipeline review with them this morning, and that's every single deal. Like, there's zero error margin there. And so as a result of that, there's a chance that they'll put undue pressure because at the end of the day, I said to them, "Do we expect these to close, period?" And they said, "Well, yeah." And I'm thinking, "Oof, the difference between it closing in December 31st and it closing on February 15th, like, that's gonna be maybe," again, I'm all about creating sense of urgency, don't get me wrong. I love a good sense of urgency, right? But in some cases, putting undue pressure on the prospect will, put us in a bad light, will maybe damage the
Yep.
relationship. And so I would say the
Yep.
same thing with founders who have any kind of sales team at all. The same thing, right? Putting undue pressure, micromanaging the deal because founders used to be the first seller of their company.
Hmm.
They'll
Yep.
have when panic causes bad decisions, one of those bad decisions is I'm gonna jump back in and try to save the deal, close the deal, and sometimes that just adds, again, more confusion and chaos because they've been working with Susan, and now all of a sudden, somebody that they've never met and don't really know or have any trust built with, wants to jump in and thinks that they can save the day. Not only does it damage the relationship with Susan, but it possibly damages the relationship with the prospect. So those, I say a full pipeline, as you know, a full pipeline solves a lot of problems.
I think I lost you for a second.
A full pipeline solves a lot of problems.
It does, and I remember my favorite coach, Marcus Kauke. He said, "Shane, 95% of all your problems can be solved with more pipeline. So
That's
just go get
correct.
more pipeline." And it honestly is the truth, because if you have that, then new in, more out is what I say, right? It's just
That's
quite an
right.
easy thing to look at. So, finding the sales acceleration group, you founded Sales Acceleration Group in 2016. What was the
Mhm.
specific problem you saw in the market that made you think, I need to build a company around solving this?
Yeah, I think because founders are the first sellers, they also tend to be the first sales leaders. And a lot of
Hmm.
times they weren't qualified to do either, right? They definitely weren't. They used their Rolodex and the friends and family and the VC connections that they had, and then got themselves to 750,000 or $1 million. But they did it. They didn't do it the way that a true seller would do it, right? I call it the founder advantage. And so they used founder advantage, the fact that their, title is founder or CEO. They probably have been
Yep.
immersed in the industry for years, right? They probably have
Yep.
deep industry networks, contacts. And so how they got to that first million, I always say, like, even another Christieism, what gets you here won't get you there. And so the
Yep.
method in which, right, which is why I come in to solve that sales playbook problem, the way you got to $1 million is not the way you're going to get to five, right? And so, making, that's so then, one of the problems is, well, we're transitioning. We've hired our first sales rep or two, and now I'm playing sales leader, but I want them to do it the way I did it. And that's where things start to fall apart because they don't have the title that you have. They don't have founder advantage, right? They don't have the title. They don't have the network
No.
connections. They don't have the 25 years in the industry. And oh, by the way, they did not give birth to the product, right? So they didn't give birth to that
Yep.
baby. So they don't know everything. They don't know all the ins and outs of the product like you do. And so when the founder becomes the first sales leader after being the first sales rep, that can cause some friction as well.
It's tough. It is tough. It is a real tough one. So I want to talk about a little bit more around the revenue process and signal
Mhm.
around that, because it's a philosophy that I believe a lot of problems can be solved with. There's been a number of businesses that I've gone into, and I've gone into the business and they're not even using a CRM. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, wow, okay. So I'm sure you're using like a spreadsheet or something, right? And they said no, and I was just like, all right, Google Docs? No, it wasn't even that. I'm not even going to reveal what it was because I think it will make it quite obvious. But I said, look, first of all of that needs to go buy a CRM today, put everything in there today, and I want to see what it looks like. And then you see like, no, add on every note, and then you see the no, add it more. Now enrich it, and like everything is now pumped up to the max. But like without sales, like that's one of the fundamental truths. But what even is a sales process today? A lot of founders hear the word sales process and they think they know it all. So they think it's just a bureaucracy that slows things down. So for those out there that like maybe new to it or just want to understand it at a very basic level, explain to me like I'm 12, what is a sales process and why does not having one kill revenue?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a roadmap, right? It's the starting point and the finish line and all of the places that you stop along the way to see all the, the largest ball of yarn and the the best coffee in town. Like it's all of those little milestones. It's all of the things that need to happen in order for you to get to the finish line. And so, there there are everybody's got a different motion as I call it. But the bottom line is
Mhm.
if you head out without a map or, Waze or whatever you're using to get to where your endpoint is. The fact of the matter is then how are you going here's the thing that kills me, Shane. We have like even companies that have a process. When I come in and I, kind of dig around and maybe sit in on a prospect call or two, it becomes very obvious that we're the only ones that know about the process. We know what should happen next, but we haven't shared that with the prospect. So again, it would be like you and I deciding we're going to drive from St. Louis, where I live, down to Florida because it's getting cold here. We want to go somewhere warm for the
Mhm.
winter. And
Mhm.
just saying like, like, "Hey, so like, how long is it gonna take us?" Or, "Where are we gonna like, it's a 20 plus hour drive. Are we gonna stop along the way? Are we gonna spend the night somewhere? When are we gonna eat? How many miles to the gallon does your car get?" And me basically not telling you anything and asking you just to, "Oh, just Shane, just trust me. We're gonna get to Miami, I promise you." Right? And so, like, it's funny when I say that, right? Because you would be like,
Yeah.
Well, that sounds pretty controlling, right? I mean, I sound like a control,
Yes.
right? I sound like
Yep.
a control
Yep.
freak.
Yep.
But
Yep.
once we have a formal process in place that because we will know where we're going, but we also always don't know the answer to some of your questions, right? Well, when should we stop? Right? When should we stop? How do we know that we're headed the right way? How do we know that we're going to get there by tomorrow morning? Right? What are the indicators along the way? So, yes, we have to map out a formal sales process and then we need to not keep it a secret. So, I normally, when I'm working with prospects, I say, I have that discovery call. And normally I have two because that's part of my process. The first one's a little bit of get to know you, figure out what the business
Mhm.
problem is. And then the second one is, well, let's narrow down to an SOW, right? To a statement of work. So so part of my process includes two discovery calls, not one. And then I say after that, I'm going to send you over the SOW to you in a Word document. You're going to look it over and you're going to redline anything that you don't like. Either, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I changed my mind. Or, hey, I forgot to tell you that we need this help. And so
Mhm.
we'll add that
Mhm.
in. And then and only then do I put the financials to it. So then I say, like, once you send that back to me, and we've got, again, I'm holding people accountable. We've got deadlines. So when I get off that call, I say, I'm going to have the SOW due by the end of the day tomorrow. How long will it take you to review it and send it back to me? And you're going to tell me.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to schedule a call for the following day because I'm going to say to them, when you send it back to me, I'm going to clean it up and then I'll put the financials to it. And then we're going to meet again. Right. And then, and then at that point, if it's good, I'm going to send you over an electronic version to sign. Then I'm going to send you over the invoice, which has to be paid before we get started. I mean, like, I'm outlining everything. So why on earth? But I hear sellers all the time not
Yep.
outlining what the process looks like so that everybody knows what's coming next and it's not a surprise.
It's true. It's very true, and it makes it more like one thing I literally just I've recently had this conversation, and it's why wouldn't you want to make your prospect's life easier? And it shows them you're prepared. It shows them you're organized. It shows them you're structured. It shows them that you have shit under control
That's right.
versus showing up to a call like, oh my gosh, like the times that I have seen people show up to a call unprepared and then the call take 12 minutes and then they wonder why is this deal not closing is outrageous. And then I think that comes down to discipline, right? Some of these people, they get older, they think that they didn't know it all. Nothing against old people, but it's just
Thanks,
older
thanks, Shane.
generations have a very, very different view. And it's to say, you know what? I'll say it's more so on the European side. So
Mm,
you say a common problem is lack of documentation and discipline
that's right.
around sales process. Why is discipline so hard for sales teams? Aren't they supposed to be naturally driven?
Yeah. Yes, they should be natural driven, but discipline again, and discipline's not just if you're not a disciplined person by nature, right? That means in your personal life too. That means, when the alarm goes off in the morning and you're supposed to get up and go to the gym, you don't. You hit the snooze button.
Mhm. Yep.
Or, you know that you need to get 8 hours of sleep, but you're still up at midnight, playing video games or whatever you're doing. So I think,
Yep.
discipline is not just a professional trait, and it's not a skill, by the way, it's a trait. And so, yes, I think there's lots of lack of discipline in sales. But if you're not like I say, I say this is my other Christyism. I cannot motivate the unmotivated. I can only inspire the self motivated. And
Yep.
so, if you're going to put the process together, well, and this goes back to having an accountability culture, right? So I say to people, like, we can't hold anybody accountable to expectations that we haven't set. We can't set expectations if we haven't written things down, right? So I can say to you, hey, I'm going to need you to close $1 million by the end of the year, but I haven't told you how I expect you to get there. Is that $1 million deal? Or do I need 5 deals at $200,000? Like, what do I need from
Mhm.
you? Right.
Yep.
And so,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think that the discipline problem is like, let's talk about the redheaded stepchild. Let's talk about prospecting and filling your pipeline, right? That requires a tremendous amount of discipline because, by the way, like, not everything in sales is fun, right?
Yep.
What's fun?
It's
What's
very
fun?
true.
Getting the DocuSign back, right? That's fun. All the other stuff before that, not as fun. And the least fun thing about sales is filling your pipeline because most people's, God love them, most people don't have marketing departments that are bringing in enough inbound leads to fill their pipeline. And so setting aside, like, time blocking your calendar for prospecting, not fun,
Mhm.
requires discipline, and is necessary. So I think
Mhm.
the lack of discipline just comes from the not fun part.
Mhm. Look, for me, in terms of that grind, I think it's well worth it. For me, and I don't know, I'm one of those weird people. My dad always said, "Yeah, CEOs and entrepreneurs are really weird anyway. That's why you're the way you are." And I'm like, "Yep, I know. I'm a very, very strange person." And it was like, I was very fortunate. I'm not here to brag, but I set up my first business in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. I got my first invoice from Cognizant for 4,000 for the quarter, and within 3 days, I had my first like 22,000 in revenue, and it was again just
Addicting.
that call and that buzz,
Yeah,
and you're just like,
yeah.
holy shit! And then I hired people to do it for me and screwed up the whole business. So don't don't
'Cause
hire too quickly, right?
you didn't have a formal process, right?
It is very, very true. It's very, very true, and it's one of the traps, right, that we'll talk about right now. So you help founders transition from founder-led selling to building their first sales team. I'm in a lot of those processes right now. So what's the biggest mistake founders make when they try to hire their first salesperson?
Hiring someone that has sold before and basically handing them a laptop thinking that they'll just figure it out, right? No onboarding,
100%.
no formal processes, no playbook, no, I was with a separate client, last week, at the end of last week, and I realized that they had hired 7 new account managers, but in talking to the Salesforce admin and talking to them about Trailhead, because I'm like, "Oh, I think you
Mhm.
should be able to find that information on Trailhead," and they said, "Hey, while we're talking about that, like, do you think that the account managers should be using Trailhead?" And I said, "Well, didn't you put them through Salesforce training? Like, have them get some Salesforce certifications or put them through the sales courses?" They're like, "No." And I was like, "Okay, well, no wonder they're not using Salesforce the way it was designed to be used," right? And so, just and again, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, if you've been a Salesforce administrator, but you've never been responsible for onboarding, which this individual had not been, responsible for onboarding anybody, then they didn't know, and they're like, "Well, I'm not really their boss," right? So I didn't, wasn't sure I could tell them what to do. But yeah, I mean, the number of people I've got another client right now, I'm working with them because they mishired 3 sales reps in a 6-month none of the 3 stayed longer than that 3 months was the shortest time and 6 months was the longest time. And I
Yeah.
said, "Well, like, tell me about" well, like, they came from the industry, right? They'd sold into this industry before, but they hadn't sold your product before, right? And they hadn't
Yes.
maybe sold to your persona before. And you have a six-figure, $250,000 average sale and a 12 to 18-month sales cycle, and they might not have done that before. So, one of the most important things that I do, here's the tip of the day. When I'm hiring sales rep number 1, 2, or 3 for my founders, when we're starting to build and scale that team, I'm looking for someone who has done almost the identical process that we have. Same average sale, same sales cycle, same sales stages, talking to someone similar, not necessarily the exact persona, but someone
Mhm.
same or adjacent.
Mhm.
Because even though I'm gonna onboard them, right? I told you I'm gonna give you good formal onboarding, but I've got a much better chance of them succeeding and them onboarding more quickly if what we're doing looks like what they've done before. So it's like, why would I hire somebody like if you've got a $20,000 90-day sales cycle, why would you hire somebody who came from the industry but has only done six-figure deals that lasted 12 months? Right? You're gonna say to
Very
yourself,
poor
"Well, but
choice.
it's gonna be easier. It's a 90-day sales cycle." Well, but we're not used to creating sense of urgency or holding people accountable or having one meeting a week with a prospect. If you've got an 18-month sales cycle, you're used to having one meeting a month maybe, or one every other month maybe, right? And you're used to talking to 8 people in the organization, not 2. And so it sounds like, well, that should be easier if you've done the hard things. Well, no, but if you've never done that thing, that's hard.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
It
make
is,
your
it's
life
true.
easier
People
and
do
find
different
somebody
things.
who's done exactly what you're doing and the way you're doing it so that they go, "Oh, this is very familiar to me. I know this motion."
Well, I want to talk about red flags with that when you're hiring salespeople, and I have made God knows how many mistakes hiring certain people. And I remember one time I had a meeting with this individual, and it was my first year of business, and we were talking about something, and he just said, well, you did this and you went through this and you did this. And I just was on this call, and I was just like, wow, this person just has like, I thought I was bad, and I thought I was quite a nightmare when I was an employee even like at school, but then even employee at certain companies, and I had to just leave the call. I honestly, like, there's four of us on it, my two co-founders and this one individual who we were like just having a conversation with about his behavior and how he talks, and that made me never want to run or build a sales, and I will never run a sales agency again ever in my life. I hate it that much, and people will know that. So when you're helping a company hire salespeople, what is the one red flag in a candidate that makes you immediately say this person won't work out? What they won't work out?
Oh, one red flag. There's so many more than just one.
Hmm.
Um, Again, like not really having a process. So the very first interview question I ask somebody is, you know, pick out of all your past jobs, pick up the one that you think closely mirrors us and walk me, just like I said, we're going from St. Louis to Miami. I want you to walk me step by step through your process, starting with how you even get a lead. And if they can't walk me through that, then I know that they probably you know, didn't
Hmm.
succeed at that previous job. So,
Yep.
and then, then I follow that up with, great, you've just outlined the entire process. Where's your superpower lie? Which part of the process is your super strength? Is your secret weapon? And if they can't answer that, then I'm like, then they don't know themselves well enough, right? Lack of self-awareness. And so you can't lean into that superpower. You can't I always say, like, if you're going through the whole process, back in the day, I read the book Good to Great. It still sticks with me today. And basically it says you can't take a D skill and make it an A skill. You just can't. So you have to have awareness that that D skill, maybe you can get that to a B
Yep.
minus, right?
Yep.
But you're never going to get that to an A, but you can get a B minus skill to an A. And so if the deal's going south, you'll have to lean into your superpower, right? Or your secret weapon or whatever it is that you know that you do better than most people, that you have extreme confidence in. So when I ask that question and you can't answer that question, or you say like, oh, well, like, I'm really good with people, or, discovery. And I go, so I'm going to dig deep, right? I'm like, discovery is my superpower. And I said, well, tell me why. Why do you do, and I say your superpower is something that, you outshine your coworkers and your competitors in, right? And so
Hmm.
what about discovery makes you your superpower? I'm just great at questioning. People tell me things. But what I haven't heard yet is I'm able to uncover business problems and the financial impact of those business problems in a 45-minute call.
That is like very, very accurate, very, very specific, and very, very. It does make a big difference. It does. I don't think I've ever used that, and I think that's a huge nugget to take away from today's episode. So there's one question, there's one actually position on your profile, and it's about a company called Gainsight, and I
Uh-huh.
want to ask you a question about that. But for those that don't know, like what is Gainsight? Maybe if you could tell a little bit about the
Sure.
financials, their size, and then we can go into that question about that, which I think is quite important and helpful to most that are listening.
Sure. Gainsight was the number one unicorn in their space. And so they provided customer success. They're still around. They provide customer success software. And I started working for them, I don't know, 10 plus, let's see, I mean, 10 years, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, and built out their first SDR team. And so I think they had just gotten Series E funding. So somewhere between
Mhm.
Series D and Series E. I think there was Series D when I bought when I came on, but they were working on E and they got E shortly after I joined. So a
Mhm.
pretty big organization with a lot of funding, but a lot of expectations that went along with that. So I was fortunate enough to build out their first SDR team from 0 to 13 in about 6 weeks. So again, talk about hiring pressure. You got to get that as right as you can get that. But it was a most amazing experience. And again, there's a lot of customer success software platforms out there, but we were so early in the journey that I said I sat in the bullpen with my SDR team, and all I would hear all day long is, Gainsight, Gainsight. We're customer success software. And you can hear people like, I don't know what that means. Like, well, do you have like account management? And like, that's the, because we couldn't figure out who to talk to because most companies didn't have a director of customer success at that point. And so,
Yeah, very
particularly in the
true.
Midwest, right? So we spent our time on the coast talking to the East and West Coast and kind of worked our way into the Midwest over time. But yeah, a very, very interesting opportunity for you very rarely as a sales leader, Shane, do you get to build out your sales team from zero. Like I've only done it that one time.
Wow. Wow, it is an interesting journey. It definitely is. But what did you do differently though in that period that made it work? Like most companies struggle even with one good SDR. So what did you do that was so different that did make it work?
Yeah, I did a few things. We did a lot of education. I'm like I said, the art of sales. I did a lot of art of sales training. I did a ton of call
Mhm.
coaching. I divided the team. I had two inbound SDRs and the rest were outbound. And then over time, I realized that I needed to partner much more closely with marketing. So initially, we weren't getting really any, I call it like ground cover, right? We weren't getting any air cover from marketing. We were just out, we were basically in the marketing department and the sales department. And marketing was doing a lot of brand building, if you will, trying to get our name out there. And putting together, we were the very first to put together the very first customer success conference. And it wasn't a user conference. The majority of people who came to Pulse, as we called it, were not Gainsight customers. So we were really building out. We were creating a category, right? We were category creators, and so I took people. Ironically, I took people from all over. I took 3 or 4 people from an organization here in St. Louis that did outsourced SDR work. So I took some people from there. I took some
Mhm.
people from retail. I took a couple of younger people and I put them on the inbound side because the majority of people who came inbound were not ICP. They were just customer success curious, right? And so they did not, right? They were just customer success curious.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
weren't ICP, and so I didn't want, I wanted to let the junior people kind of grow up with the inbound, and then they could move to outbound.
Mhm.
But really, I mean, I just remember doing a ton of call monitoring. I remember having, regular meetings, but remember, like, so I had my office, everybody just sat right outside me. So that management by
Yeah.
walking around was super helpful because I could hear things happening in real time. Like, let's bring our problems. But I think the most impactful thing I did was reach out to the CMO and say,
Mhm.
I need help, right? Like, I need you to help warm some stuff up and because we were just doing this, we were just doing territory based like fire shot, right? Throwing spaghetti
Mhm.
at the wall to see if it would stick. And once I finally got, once marketing got involved, we decided to we stole straight out of the development playbook, the sprint concept. And so every six,
Okay.
yep, because here was the deal. These are younger sales reps, right? Kids out of college, they affectionately call them. And it's too hard for them to call into manufacturing and then a financial company and then healthcare
Mhm.
company because we were for everybody, right? As long as you were, selling SaaS for the most part into wherever, then we were for you. But what happened is that you got to switch your brain. Like every time a new lead would come up in your Salesforce, instance, you're like, okay, I got to change. Like if we're talking to, I always use this is the easy example. If I'm calling it a financial institution, you know, credit unions call them members, banks call them customers, right? And so you gotta make those nuanced switches in real time. So instead of making them do that all the time, we said we're gonna do 4 to 6 week sprints into manufacturing. So the Friday before we would start that sprint, we would do a 2-hour training session. We give them all the vernacular, hear the business problems, hear the objections you might hear. We prep them, and then except for the inbound, all 11 SDRs are now doing the same thing, hearing each other over the cubicle walls and coming and having the same conversations, the same problems are coming up that we can solve in real time, as opposed to why, somebody going, well, have you had this problem? Well, no, I haven't, but that's because they didn't call into manufacturing. So then we would move to the next industry and the next industry and the next industry. Best thing I ever did was was do the same thing, have them do the same thing over and over and over again, because in
Mhm.
6 weeks they got proficient.
Those reps It's putting in those reps. It was the one thing that I was in a very when we met, I was probably 1 year in, but I was in a very dark place in my life, and it was just the one thing I was sitting on my sofa, just like ready to give up. And I still remember it to this day. And it was just like, you can carry on feeling like a bum, or you can get your ass up and go to the gym right now. And it was like 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and it was a 24-hour gym. I paid for the gym membership. I
Right?
got there, and lo and behold, those reps for my mental health and then my physical health and a small piece of my spiritual health
Yeah.
it strengthened so much, and that was very easily transferred into how I operated in business. And then those reps again in business over the past 3 years, I think because of the initial stages from like 2014 to 2020, and then 2020 to 2023, which was like service pre-AI, then mega with AI, and now like accelerated AI, these reps have become like 1 by 1 to 10 by 10 to now like 100 by 100 reps. It's
Mhm.
absolutely insane. So one other piece I think that's really interesting when it comes to developing a sales team and understanding sales is uh, I'm noticing one thing where I see people have a very hard time listening. And I mean like active listening, not listening to respond. I'm sure you've had that phase in your life where you used to just listen because you were waiting for that one thing that you thought 3 minutes to say, like, and then he or she interrupts
I've
you
got
and you
this
don't
nugget.
give
I
it.
have to share my nugget.
And it's just about like if you just listen to what the person is saying, like you don't have to think about anything. You will just ask a natural, curious question. So you say that's one of the hardest lessons you've learned, and it is not what you say, but how you say it. Can you give us an example of a time when you said the right thing the wrong way and it backfired?
Oh, yeah. I got that example in my back pocket. I was the VP of sales, working for a small
Yeah.
company, fewer than 50 employees, about probably this time 6 or 7 million in revenue. I had full revenue responsibility, net new and the BDR team and the customer success team. And the
Hmm.
owner called an impromptu meeting, like to all the executives, which were about 4 or 5 of us. And he said, come to my, just come to my office, like impromptu meeting. So I show up, and back in the day, this was not I didn't have a laptop. We had PCs back then, so we didn't
Yeah.
schlep that to the office, right? So I grab my notebook and my pencil or pen, and I get to the office. I get to his office, and the channel partner manager is standing next to me, and the ops manager and whatever. And the owner starts saying things, the CEO owner starts saying things that were sort of like he's giving us action, right? Like, I want this, I want to do this. And so I'm like quickly scribbling notes or whatever. And the girl next to me says, who was a friend of mine, Angie, and she says, "Can I borrow your pencil?" And I was like, "You didn't bring anything to write with?" Right? And I said it out loud. I was frustrated. I was like, "Who comes to a meeting with the owner and doesn't bring anything to
Yeah.
write with?" And I was like, "You didn't bring anything to write with?" And I said it again, like, as my parents would say, I don't really own an inside voice. So,
Yeah.
everybody in the room heard or whatever, and she wasn't offended because I have a pretty direct communication style and we were friends, so that didn't actually hurt her feelings, but it bothered the boss. And so about 30 minutes later, he showed up in my office and said, like, "You can't talk to people like that." And I was shocked because I was like, I thought she was in the wrong and I was in the right. But he didn't like the culture that was building, right? He didn't like
Yeah.
and he acknowledged that it didn't bother her. He's like, I could see on Angie's face that it didn't bother her, but it bothered me, and I don't want my employees talking to each other that way. And I was, like, teary, like, I was like, first off, no one likes to get called out, and secondly, like, this was my livelihood. I was the second most important person in that building, right? I mean, reporting up to him and had full revenue responsibility, and so, I, like, swallowed my pride, took a big glass of wine that night and sat down and got, right with myself,
Mhm.
and called my dad. His first called my dad because my dad had a business coach. And
Mhm.
ironically, my dad's business coach, even though my dad was in Kansas, my dad's business coach was in St. Louis. He was in my backyard. And I
Mhm.
said, "Can I have Jeff's phone number?" And he's like, "What's going on?" And I told him, and he goes, "Sure." And so he goes, "I don't think you did as much damage as you think you did." And I said, "Well, I'm flipping out because I'm the breadwinner of my family. and I
Mhm.
can't afford to lose this job. Not only do I really love what I do, like,
Mhm.
I can't put my family in this situation because I can't keep my mouth shut. And
Mhm.
so I hired a business coach, and about 3 days later, I walked in because the boss had kinda said, like, I need to know whether or not this is something you're gonna get a handle on or not." And about 3 days later, I
Mhm.
walked into his office and said, "I heard you. I'm sorry. I heard you, and I'm gonna fix the problem. I've hired myself a business coach." And he was like, "Oh." He's like, "Well, tell me more." And so I did, and he said, "I'll pay for it." Because I was intending to pay out of my own pocket. And so he said, "I'll pay for it." And about 6 months later, things had gone so nicely that he brought the guy in to work with every executive in the company.
Wow, that is incredible. I've had 2, let's say the most impactful one. I literally had one last year. Well, no, actually, sorry, this year. And then I think the biggest impactful statement I had was one from one of my dad's friends. So it was back in 2015. I just got into sales, and this is why you don't listen to somebody like Grant Cardone when you
Mm.
are getting into your sales career. And like the first thing I read, I still remember, is like, I want to know how to close. And then I was like, well, I know how to close now, but I can't open shit. Like, what the hell is going on here?
You can't close what doesn't exist, right?
Exactly, right? And then I had to go to the open time. Like, all right, now I know how to prospect, but I can't handle this middle situation. This is where everything's fucking up. And it was like, but then it was this point of like, he is about confidence. And I was like, all right, so I'm going to be confident and I'm going to exude confidence so that it shines through and it shows like a well-rounded character. And I bought this personality to this dinner where I'm late 20s and I'm around my dad's friends, and I was speaking to him, and I talked about a job that I was doing and how it was so great. And he looked at me and he said, "You sound just so arrogant." I said,
Mm,
I'm confident." And he said, "No, you sound arrogant as shit, and I wouldn't want to talk to you."
mm,
And I was just like, uh, I didn't know what to say, and those words rang like they hit home big time, right? And I learned how to kind of humble myself big time. But then this character, I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm sure you have. I don't think I'm the only crazy person in the world, but this character emerged when I became a founder CEO. And this
mm,
personality developed where I had to be in control and I had to be confident, I had to be disciplined, but and I was nice until nice didn't get me what I needed to
right.
do, or getting what I needed to get done. And then nice turned into a bit of anger, and anger turned into how do I instill fear to get things done. And then I
Mm,
lost my business. A lot of what I did because of those actions and because of those behaviors. And then I learned through my podcast journey how to behave and what you are actually doing as a CEO and how you're supposed to be creating opportunities and wealth for others. And then that transitioned into the next role, which I was very kind and I was very happy and I was very supportive and I was a big team player. And I even was like, "You're not the winner of this. It's not your vehicle. So take a step back and be number two, number three, and make this person really good." And after a while, got to a point though where um, I had a blow up in a meeting, a big blow up, because a lot of the narrative was around perfection and everything is good and everything is
mm,
hunky dory. And I'm a British man who was raised in New Jersey where people tell you off if you fuck around, right? And if you don't do and just little things, right? You get told off. And that was my narrative. I'm gonna tell him off. I told him off. I told that guy off last week. And I got to that point in this meeting and it was an outburst, and the feedback was nobody wants to work with you because you're not presenting yourself as somebody easy to work with. You're very emotionally driven and you let it get the best of you. And even though you perform and you can deliver and you can create like massive results, the person who you are seen as is not a person that somebody else wants to be around. And I figured out that that is a big weakness of mine that I don't know how to control because it's something
mm.
where I can't be this fake person. So what is the answer? Own your own business. And then you can be that in that case
Yeah,
and get a bit of guidance. So
it's funny.
what's a bit
Yeah,
of feedback from you on that? On
yeah.
those characters that emerge and those personalities. How do they emerge? What are your opinions or how do you recommend or suggest people change those behaviors?
Yeah, it's funny. I'll tell a similar story since we're both being vulnerable today. About 3 years into me starting my own business, things were not going well, and I was flipping out. And again, call
As
my
they do.
dad. Yeah, call my dad again. My favorite business owner was my father, always my go-to. And I said to him, I said, "I think I'm gonna have to go back and get," I called it a real job. I'm gonna have to go back, like, this was like my, like, as if it was my play job, but I was making more money at my play job than I ever did at my real job. I was like, "I think I'm gonna have to go back and get a real job." And he goes, "No, no, no, no,
Yeah.
that's a bad idea," he says. I said, "Why is
Yeah.
that a bad idea?" He says, "Because in this job, you can tell people what they need to hear that they don't want to hear, and instead of
Mhm.
firing you, they're gonna pay you." And my dad said for the very first time, he said, I was constantly worried about you getting fired because you were so honest. It's not what you say, but
Mhm.
how you say it. And he
Yep,
said, like,
absolutely.
he goes, "And you're not wrong." He goes, "You're normally right, but that's not like, you can say what you need to say." Like, it was a read your audience, right? And so
Yep.
I wasn't really reading my audience all the time. Right?
Mhm.
And it came across, for you, it came across sometimes as arrogant. For me, sometimes it came across as disrespectful, right? And just not knowing my place, like overstepping
Yep.
my bounds, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and
Mhm.
the writing utensil example, that was a private conversation that should have happened with Angie after the fact, right? I should have slipped her a pencil to make a quick note or whatever, and then afterwards been like, "Hey, chica, like, you can't come to the boss's office empty-handed." Right?
You
So,
froze for a second.
sorry, yeah, I think, you can't come to the boss's office empty-handed, right? But that was a
Nope.
we praise in public, right? Here's the standard that your parents taught you, right? We praise in public and
Mhm.
we reprimand in private, and I had not done that, and again, goes back to the situation that you're in, is sometimes because the companies are so small, and here's the real honest answer, I think, is people see it as a family. Right? They talk about it
Yep.
all the time, right? But we're a
Yep.
family, right? They've been with me from the
Mhm.
beginning. We're a family. Well,
Yep.
sometimes you talk to your family shitty, right? And you know that they're not, they may get their feelings hurt and get bruised, but they're not going anywhere because they're blood, right? But these
Yep.
people aren't. To your point, these aren't your family. These are your
Nope.
employees, right? And even though it
Yep.
may feel like it, and you may celebrate holidays together, or you're there with every birth of a child and death of a parent, it's still not a family. It's a business. And so,
Yep.
you've got to make sure that you're reprimanding in private. And again, it's okay. Again, I like you. I'm passionate. I say we're passionate
Yep.
people. We are
Yep. Yep.
passionate
Yep.
people.
Yep. That's the right word.
Again, like, but there's no like. Here's what as I've gotten older,
Mhm.
I've come up with this motto: everyone's doing the best they can in that moment. I truly aside from a few bad people, right? Like, when something bad happens, when somebody says something out of character that's a little bit hurtful or
Mhm.
whatever, I say to
Yep.
myself, instead of, coming back at them and getting defensive, I'm like, I wonder what happened before we got on the phone together, right? I'm trying to give somebody the benefit of the doubt and say,
Yep.
like, they're doing the best they can in the moment. Now, my backside of that statement is, over time, sometimes people's bests are not good enough for me, right? So if you're doing the best you can day in and day out, but it's not working for me, or it's
Yep.
not gonna get the desired result that the company needs, then I can acknowledge that you are doing the best that you can, but your best isn't gonna be good enough for where we need to take the company. And so we may have to part ways in order for
Yep.
you to be successful. Like, I'm always
Yep.
like, and I'm like so much like older, wiser in my 50s, right? And even in my 40s I
Mhm.
was, but in my 20s and 30s not so much. But I mean, like, I say to them, I'm like, "Hey," I go, "You must really hate coming to work every day." Right? I mean, you're struggling, you're frustrated, getting out of bed must be really hard. And so, why don't we agree to part ways, and I'll help you find the right role for you where you can be
Yep.
successful and love getting out of work every day. And it's a win-win. Like, there should be no, like, again, I'm going to fire you if you do something unethical, right? Like,
Yep.
on the spot.
Absolutely.
But if you're
Yep.
trying, and again, I call it will versus skill. If your
Mhm.
will is there, but your skill's just not, like, yes, you could develop it over time, but we might not. Again, I work with early stage startups. We might not have that much time, right? And so let's put you in a position in a more mature company with a,
Yep.
much more, let's say, consistent training program or something that we might not, or somebody who's, I always say, like, every day's a new day at a startup, right? Like, oh, we're just gonna,
Hmm.
we need to change pricing or messaging or whatever. Like, you need to be more willow than oak. But if you need
Hmm.
more oak trees, right? If you're more oak and you need something very sturdy on a day-in-day basis, startup, like I said, the startup fit is not for everyone.
It's not.
Right. And so I think, like, when founders get frustrated, first, like, first off, it's passion, right? This is, like I said, this is your baby. You gave birth to this. You don't want
Yeah.
something to go wrong, right? And you think, even, you're like, and your baby's beautiful to you, you know,
Yeah.
but, but again, like, a lot of times I also see that when people get frustrated and founders blow up, it's because they haven't set proper expectations. They're just in their head. Here, what I'm
Yeah.
expecting of Shane is in my head, but I haven't sat down and have an expectation conversation with you. So you
Yeah.
are doing your best, right? But you
Hmm.
don't know the realistic or unrealistic expectations I might have. But if I had shared those with you, you might say, "Hey, Kristie, like, based on my skill set, I'm not capable of doing what you're asking for. So either you need to train me up, or again, perhaps we need to part ways." But I also find that people, high achievers like us, we take the expectations we have of ourselves and we place them on others without
That's
telling.
amazing. It's amazing how you've said that. It is. It's absolutely a nail on it, and that's what screwed me up. I had no idea because you know what it was growing up in high school. I was always afraid to answer the question in the class, and
Oh,
typically my answer was right. I thought the only way to get I felt very stupid in school, and I thought the only way to get recognition was to be funny and
to
humorous,
act
which ended
out.
up being like,
Yep,
right, the class clown. And it was like I just didn't know any better. I really just didn't know any better until I got into business. And because I thought I was so inadequate in business, even though my motivation and my discipline and drive was so high, I thought, well, they could just do it. I'm a nobody. I've screwed up so many things in my life. Like, surely this person can work better than me or is better than me. And it came to me that I was Shane, you're too much. You are too much. You just don't stop. Other people can't operate at your speed.
that's
You
right.
don't know when to, and it's because I have that addictive personality, but you got to know thyself is
That's right.
definitely something that is
That's right.
seriously, seriously important. So we're approaching the top of the hour, and I think we've had
Mhm.
a really good. But there's a few little pieces we didn't touch too much on the AI piece, but I do want to. I want to have you chime in on it because it is important, and then we do have to talk a little bit about the handy
Nice.
dandy book that a few of my clients are going to get too. So
Good.
you've said without a formal sales process, AI will just add chaos, which it will, and it will add a lot of confusion.
Mhm.
We're all rushing to use it. I'm using it in multiple ways, especially
Me
in
too.
sales. So why is it dangerous if you don't have processes first?
Well, because AI is gonna do whatever you tell it to do, and if you have a broken process or a half-baked process, it'll just do it faster, right? It'll just take your broken or your half-baked process and just do it faster. So, but, this is a really, I mean, AI is gonna force us, I think, because I think people are gonna implement AI into broken or half-baked processes and have it blow up. And then, in X
Hmm.
number of months from now, they're gonna be like, AI sucks and it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing or whatever. And I'm like, does AI suck? Or did you give it a
To you.
half-baked process? Right? Did you feed it a half-baked process? I mean, it's just like a prompt, right? Like,
Yeah.
the minute I started adding this last sentence to every one of my prompts, and then please review what I've asked of you and ask me any questions that you have one at a time that will help you better complete the assignment, right? And so just adding that, right, to at the end of my prompts, now my chat always asks me questions. It never says, "Oh, nope, I'm good to go." Like, right? I've forced it to stop and slow down and reread
Yes.
everything, right? Because now it's being asked to ask me questions. So now it has to go back to make sure, does it really understand it or does not really understand it? And the questions will let me know where I came up short, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think people are going to find out that just adding AI to the mix is, if you don't have something that not only just formal and documented, but successful, right?
Yeah.
If the process has been successful in a more manual way, then it should be successful when you speed it up by using
Yeah.
AI. And so, if it's been successful, formalize it, document it, pressure test it, right? You got to pressure test it. Like, let's not go all in. Like, let's have one or two people pressure test it before we,
Mhm.
roll AI out to the entire team. But yeah, I don't think what people are very excited. I'm very excited. I know you're very excited about AI and all the things it can do for us. It really has already changed my life and positive. I mean, as a
Yep.
solopreneur with a couple of 1099s, like it's been game changing for me. I'm getting a lot of shit done. Like, right? I'm like, get shit
Yep.
done. Let's get shit done. But if I didn't
Absolutely.
have, but I have a very formal, right? I have a very formal interview process, a very formal sales playbook process. I have a very formal hiring. I've got all of these. I've built out all of my systems, right? So I can plug
Mhm.
and play different clients into them. So I basically, like the other day, I just fed it my playbook. I said, here's the playbook that I've built. I'd like, and it's funny because I said it, I want to expand the playbook to add sales AI prompts and a couple other things that are more AI in nature. I'd never had a playbook with AI prompts. But the first thing I did was fed it my process. I fed it the playbook,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And said, based on this, tell me all the categories of sales prompts that I should be creating, and then let's create them together.
Wow. That's a really helpful one. So let's go into how you've acquired so much knowledge, and then do you have a hard stop? We've gone over 10. Are you all right for another
Okay, hold
5
on.
minutes, or are you all right?
I don't know because I closed my window out for you, so I didn't have any. Let me double check. I think I'm good. Yep, I'm good. Oh yeah, I'm good. I've got another hour. I
All
know we
right,
don't need to
cool.
spend all that much time, but I've got more time. Um,
All right.
how
So,
did so
o
I I have been so first off, I was a beta tester of the original ChatGPT. So I got in the
mhm,
beta group pretty early on, so I've been playing around with it for a while. But recently, like, I attended 5 conferences over the summer. I decided I wanted to go out there and hear what people were doing, AI, like, people were kind of freaked out. So I wanted to, like,
mhm,
get in and rub elbows with the people. I wanted to sit with people at lunch and, like, "What are you doing, and how are you handling this, and what are your what are you worried about?" And so I'm a member of Pavilion. I belong
yep,
to a group I belong to a group of executives and, entrepreneurs out of Indianapolis, so, like, even Wednesday, I'm driving up for an afternoon conference that they're having in person.
mhm,
I'm a, member of Modern Sales Pros. I'm on Slack channels. I am trying. You have to be careful because for about 3 months, I like read everything, sat in on every webinar about everything. AI and go to
mhm,
market, AI and marketing, AI and sales. How are we gonna, lead a hybrid team of agents and humans? And so I've been
mhm,
digesting everything. Now I'm trying to make some decisions. Oh, and I've demoed a ton of new platforms that are AI driven. So AI
yep,
agents, all kinds of new AI. So I've been immersing myself. So now I'm like, I could continue to do this forever, right? But I had now
yep,
I'm taking a step back and saying, okay, I think I have enough information now to be dangerous. So now I need to
yep,
be making some decisions so that I can advise my clients on, what does the future sales team look like in the next 12 months? Because that's all we really care about right now. Like, I'm trying not to look past 2026. So at
mhm,
some point, like, are we going to use agents or not use agents? Are we just going to have humans? Are we going to have a hybrid? What does that mean? Sales leaders are, by the way, there's no preparation. I've been looking. There are no classes out there for sales leaders on how to build or manage a hybrid sales team of agents and humans.
yep.
So, if anybody's interested, it's not me, by the way. I'm not interested in building that course. But if somebody's interested, let me know. Or if you already have it out there, call me and let me know where it is. I can take it. But I've been trying to come up with the characteristics and the traits that are going to be needed, the skills, the traits, the characteristics of the next generation sales leader that will probably not just be managing humans going forward. So I would tell people, like, again, do what I did. This is my recommendation. Immerse yourself for 2 to 3 months. Like, just jump into every pond that you can get your toes into. A little
Mhm,
of this, a little of that. Like I said, go to marketing and sales. I don't normally even play much in marketing, but I think marketing's gonna become way more important going forward. In fact,
yep.
I'm gonna go on a limb, make a prediction. So we're gonna listen to this in a year. I'm predicting that at some point, the first two stages of the sales cycle are actually gonna be owned by marketing.
I agree. I don't wanna speak to a seller. I do not wanna be handed off to a seller, and I do not wanna be switching people either.
Yep. I think marketing
I'm
is
of
gonna
that
become more and
generation.
more important, and we're gonna still need closers. I think we're still gonna need closers, but I think that people are gonna use AI to qualify themselves in and do their own discovery, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Using your chatbot or your AI to say, "Hey, what have I not thought about? Pressure test my idea. Tell me which vendors are most closely aligned with my business problems and how to solve them based on everything you know
Mhm.
about me." So, I think jump in with both feet, and then I'm starting the back off process where I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna go down these 3 paths. I'm gonna continue to pay attention to this. I'm gonna make these recommendations for my clients." And then I'm in, like I said, I'm in all of these communities, so I'm not gonna lose track of anything. But I had to stop, like, I mean, the number of newsletters I was getting every day was like 40. And I've started to unsubscribe from a bunch of stuff, right?
Yep,
Because I'm like,
me
okay,
too.
but I figured out which ones are the people I need to be listening to, right? So I'm picking out certain people and certain companies that I'm like, "Okay, I like what you got going on here. So now I'm just gonna follow you and I'm getting rid of all these other people." So I'm gonna take my 40
Yep,
newsletters down to 7, right? And
yep.
I figured out I jumped into everything, and now I know who I think the early adopters are, the people who really have got it figured out, the people who are headed in the right direction, the people that are not going crazy but are making good, strategic business decisions around AI. So that's my recommendation.
I agree, and I think, the last 2 pieces, they're a lot about, let's say, sharpening the saw, okay? And anybody who's a Stephen Covey fan will know what that means, but the one thing that has changed my life significantly, exponentially, the first occasion was a life coach. And that was from a
Yeah.
bad breakup where I needed to understand. That was the first bad breakup I've ever had. And it was for understanding leaving somebody gives opportunity to achieve more versus guilt for not doing. That was great. Then when I wanted to start my own business, it was a life coach that helped me step into the role of a CEO. That was game changing. I think it had a profound difference on my life. Then I had multiple coaches that I paid. My biggest investment was, I think, £23,000, £24,000 for like 3 months of coaching. It
Mhm.
was about 25% of the gross revenue of the company, but that was a performance business coach that changed my life.
Wow.
And I believe mentors have had such a big impact for me, and I believe people discredit them and they don't understand the power of it. But your advice to someone in charge of revenue who wants to go faster is find someone to mentor you who's where you want to be, and that's don't ask a fat doctor how to be skinny, and how to figure out what they did to actually get there. No reason to reinvent the wheel or do anything that's already been built, that's practical. How do you find that mentor when you don't have access to those people?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I'm a coach junkie, as I would say. Like, I mean, again, like, and because I'm a, like, immediate satisfaction gratification girl, and so, like, why would I try to figure like, I'm smart. I think I'm very smart. I think I'll be able to figure it out over time. I have, resources. I can go to YouTube or chat or whatever. But if someone else can teach me faster and I don't have to go through the pain of doing it wrong first and then doing it right. So,
Mhm.
honestly, I think the first place to go to is talk to your network. Like, when I need a
Yep.
coach for something, I go to my network and go, "Who you guys got?" Right? Because by the way, your circle matters. And you and I are like very, very we're like siblings from another mother. Um like, because we surround ourselves with top 10 percenters, right? With the top
Yes.
people, like, we surround ourselves with winners, with ambitious people, with smart people, and so, I built that network intentionally, and so when I need help, I don't know
Mhm.
you're to your point, I probably don't know who the mentor is, right? But
Yep.
someone else
Yep.
does.
Yep.
Someone else has been where I've been, and again, I'm like, why do I wanna go out there and post on LinkedIn and have to interview 40 people, right? No. Somebody's already been where I've been, and so if I make
Mhm.
3 phone calls, I probably get 3 different names of very high level I mean, you've had a bunch of good coaches, I've had a bunch of good coaches, and so now I have to interview 3 people and find the one that best fits me. But I wanna go back to something you said that I wanna make sure people didn't gloss over. You spent what was an exorbitant amount of money at the time, in your
Yep.
opinion, but how
Yep.
much money did you get from your 23,000 pound investment?
This year alone, I did 526,000 for myself.
Right, and I feel the same way, right? I feel the same way. Like when I wrote my book, I'll just transition into the book conversation for you. Um, I hired a book coach, a local woman
Okay.
who had ghost written a ton of books, including, some books that you'd heard of, the Go Giver. She had ghost written some of
Mhm.
the Go Giver books.
Mhm.
And so what I needed was I have discipline. What I don't have is a lot of extra time as a solopreneur. And I know I
Yep.
wanted to write a book. So I know myself, and I know that sometimes
Mhm.
what I really hired was an accountability culture coach,
Yep.
right? An accountability coach, right? And
Yep.
so every week we met once a week for 90 minutes. Every session ended with homework for me. I had to turn my homework in, and 7 days from then we were going to review that. And it still took me 2 years to write the book, but and I took a couple of, couple month breaks from that during high periods of high clients, and to where I just didn't feel like I was giving it my all, and I just said I need a
Mhm.
couple months to go with, get through the client load and then go back at it.
Mhm.
But I thought to myself, like, why would I've never I'm a by the way, I wanna point out that I'm a journalism major. Like, I was an AP English girl in high school. I majored in journalism. Writing is my thing, and I still hired a coach because I'd never written a book,
Yep.
right? And
Absolutely.
so
Yep.
don't, you know, sometimes the coach is gonna be paid and sometimes it'll be unpaid, like in a mentorship, but there's no reason to go it alone, and there's plenty of people like us, like, the last section of my book, I talk about now it's time for your give back. Right? And so my motto is I've got 30 minutes for everyone, and people take me up on that all the time. I
Yep.
I must have 6 or 7 30-minute meetings this week with people who just wanna pick my brain about something, and I think that's my responsibility. From all the people that helped me along the way, paid or unpaid, if I can help someone else in a 30-minute phone call, I feel like that again, we started off I'll come full circle with Shane. Do the right things and the right things will happen. I believe that helping people where I have knowledge that they don't, that's the right thing to do, and as a result of that, I think the universe will take care of me.
You couldn't have been more right on that, and I will agree. So last question. Last question. What's the last question? It was just here. If a founder is no, 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 not that one. I don't want to do that one. Jesus Christ. All right, here we go. So I always want to give a tactical challenge, right? And this is one
Okay.
of the differences about this episode on this occasion. And it's you've helped. So here's a 30-day challenge for anybody that's listening. This is my guests will make an impact in your life. They are hand selected. I believe they are game changers. And if you listen to what these guys or girls have to say, ladies and gentlemen, you will see an exponential change in your business. So, Kristie, you've helped dozens of companies go from chaos to clarity. What's one simple tactical challenge you'd give to our listeners, both investors and founders, to implement in the next 30 days that would make a measurable difference in their revenue?
Write down your expectations for every department head, depending on how many you have, or every direct report that you have. Ask them to do the same, and then in the next 30 days, sit down with make sure that someone has sat down with every employee and clearly
Hmm.
outlined the expectations. So that I wanna make sure that I always say this, every employee every day should go home, and when they walk through the door, whether it's the cat or the spouse or the child, and when someone says, "How was your day?" you can answer that question because you know whether or not you had a good or a bad day or an average day. Because if you don't know what's expected of you on a day-to-day basis,
Hmm.
how do you know when you walk through the door at night and someone says, "How was your day?" Because most people will just say, "It was fine." But stop saying it was fine and start saying, I had the most incredible day. Or you know what? I had a really disappointing day. Or I didn't get as much accomplished today as I had hoped and planned. But if people
Hmm.
don't really know what's expected of them, how do you answer that question at the end of the day? So make sure that every employee that is under your umbrella, if you're at the top of the food chain or you're a leader, understands what a good, medium, or bad day looks like and
Hmm.
what those expectations are. And then, by the way, let's make sure we reward good behavior and let's make sure we
Hmm.
reprimand in private and coach where needed.
All right, perfect. I think look, that's the best way to wrap it up. Are there any last words for anybody that's listening? Where can they find you? Where can they learn more? Where can they buy the book, which is
Yep.
fantastic?
Thank
Where
you.
can we send them?
Yep. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. After you've heard this episode, connect with me, and I always want your one takeaway. So, what was the one thing that you heard today that really resonated with you that you're going to do differently than you did before? And then, if you'd like to know more about me or the book, you can go to KristieKJones.com. There's a book tab at the top, or you can go to sellingyourwayin.com to get the book. But the book is everywhere that you normally buy your books.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. That's it for me for now, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this episode and staying here the whole way through. If you like what you saw, click subscribe. It'll take you 2 seconds. It helps me reach amazing guests and deliver valuable content for you. And if you ever want to find out what we do as a business, go to www.gorevintel.com, and that is the place where we help you make decisions that are backed by intelligence, and it's for founder CEOs. That's it for me for now. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.